Welcome back to the life of Vespasian. Welcome back from your holiday from Caesar, Ray. I had to do the last one without you with Mark Hyden. That was a fun chat.
Thank you. Well, good. I'm glad you had a good time.
Did you have a good holiday?
Yeah, because I mean, what do you want to hear? No, I missed you. I missed you. I don't know what to say. Go ahead. You got stuff to talk about.
I do. And look, we got a couple of shows to record that I'm going to have a lot of fun doing. I don't know if anyone else is going to enjoy listening to them, but yeah, you're kind of used to that if you've been listening to this show over the years. This is going to be a rabbit hole episodes.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd done the prep for this before I interviewed Mark Hyden, because this is about the Jews. So the last time this is episode 5. On episode 3, the one before the Mark interview, we had Mucianus arriving in Rome in advance of Vespasian to consolidate the power, set the table for the new Flavian dynasty. Antonius Primus, once hailed as the savior of Rome, gets kicked to the curb and exiled. 18-year-old Domitian parties like a rock star. And what now we need to talk about the Jews.
Yeah.
And I love talking about the Jews. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but I made a little movie 4 or 5 years ago called Marketing the Messiah. And I did talk a little bit about the Jews in it. Not as much as I would have liked to. Don't really want to talk about what the Jews are doing in Gaza right now, because that's depressing. And history will not look kindly upon them. I think this is I did see Yuval Harari say recently that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to Judaism, this current thing, because the ramifications of this towards Jews is going to be large and long. Anywho, we're going to talk a lot about the Jews because we're getting to the next round of the First Jewish-Roman War.
Mm-hmm.
Tacitus begins book 5 of his histories by talking about how Titus resumed the attack on the Jews after things had settled down in Rome. So people, just for new listeners, welcome. Strap in. Guy at Kung Fu said to me the other day, "Hey, I just stumbled across your podcast. I'm going to start listening." I was like,
"Oh God.
Be it on your own head. I take no responsibility for anything that might happen to you as a result of that."
What you do with that information, that's on you. I'm the conduit. Go ahead.
I said, which one? Which one? He goes, I stumbled across one of your Facebook pages. I said, which one? He goes, it's got about 40 episodes. I go, that's just futuristic. That's my AI one. That's pretty safe. Yeah, if you get into the history stuff, and that's intense.
Yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah.
So Vespasian was leading the attack on Judea, and then he took a break to go and throw his hat in the ring to become emperor. And now that he is officially emperor, although still in Alexandria, which is in Egypt, he sends his son Titus, his oldest son Titus, not Domitian, not party boy, but the grown up one, Titus, back to Rome. Back to Judea to finish the job. They sort of took a break for better part of a year, and the Jews are like, "Hey, we won!" And they're like,
"But did you?"
So fast. Yeah,
it's called a lull for a reason. Go ahead.
Tacitus says Titus was selected by his father to complete the subjugation of Judea. They had already been subjugated by our old friend Pompey the Magnificent.
Did he?
100 years earlier.
Right.
But then the Jews got uppity, and they got to go back in and remind them who the fuck they're dealing with. The Jews are like, "Hey, we've got a Messiah," and they've like, "Yeah, we've got a testudio."
Do you?
Yeah. Let's put your Messiah to the test. Our God is the greatest God. Yeah.
Is he? Here's my sword. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say that and this will probably be at the end of the second. It depends on how we do this. At the end of the second episode that we're going to record tonight, the Jews did have some reasons to be miffed at the Romans. Yes, they've got their foot on their throat, but still, I mean, you keep fucking with someone, and they're eventually going to fight back. But we'll get into that. But yeah, this is what Tacitus going. Okay, so and tell me if I've got this right. Pretty much all of Judea has been occupied by the Romans, except for Jerusalem. And so then, and I just think this is funny. I think Tacitus goes, so before this magnificent city is destroyed, let's stop here and let's go back and let's look at the history of the Jews. And a lot of the stuff that he says, I think would have went really well in a Nuremberg rally in the 1930s. So let's see what he thinks of the Jews.
The Jews. The Jew hammer.
That was quite. It's the recordings of Tacitus that I've got stored in the library. Yeah. So he starts off by talking about how Titus put together a huge army. He found in Judea 3 legions, the 5th, the 10th, and the 15th, all old troops of Vespasian's. Then he added the 12th from Syria, some men belonging to the 18th and 3rd from Alexandria. They were accompanied by 20 cohorts of allied troops and 8 squadrons of cavalry from the 2 kings Agrippa and Sarebus, the auxiliary forces of King Antiochus, and a strong contingent of Arabs who he says hated the Jews with the usual hatred of neighbors. Do you hate your neighbors, Ray? Yeah.
More than I should. Yes.
By neighbors, I mean Mexicans. They're your neighbors, really. Like, as a country. Canadians and Mexicans. Yeah.
I shouldn't answer.
And lastly, by many persons brought from the capital and from Italy, by private hopes of securing the yet unengaged affections of the prince.
Yeah.
Then he goes on to give a variety of theories on the history of the Jews and where they came from, which I found absolutely fascinating. In theory, this should be like 2 minutes of the episode.
Right.
Instead, I went so down the fucking rabbit hole with this.
Yeah. I kept writing, he said what? He wrote what? Oh my God. I mean, but yeah. So let's cover this.
Yeah, it's like, and I've been trying to talk to anyone who'll listen.
Am I right? What again? What again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time. Black Dawn. He's bald. Does he look like a bitch? What?
I love that scene. Sorry, go ahead.
So let me start by reading Tacitus, and then we'll break it apart and drill down into what the fuck is going on here.
Right.
As I'm about to relate the last days of a famous city, it seems appropriate to throw some light on its origin. Some say, here's Donald Trump here. Some people say that the Jews were fugitives from the island of Crete, who settled on the nearest coast of Africa about the time when Saturn was driven from his throne by the power of Jupiter. Evidence of this is sought in the name. There is a famous mountain in Crete called Ida. The neighboring tribe, the Idii, came to be called the Judai by a barbarous lengthening of the national name. Others assert that in the reign of Isis, the overflowing population of Egypt, led by Hierosolomus and Judas, discharged itself into the neighboring countries. So Hierosolomus is a Greek backformation of Jerusalem. So he's like, there was a Greek guy called Jerusalem who founded a city called Jerusalem, and he was with a guy called Judas, and that's why they're the Jews. And Mr. Like Jerusalem went and founded his own city. That was one of the theories.
Right.
And they came from a mountain called Ida because they're the Judai. The barbarous lengthening of the national name. How dare you lengthen your national name? That's such a barbaric thing to do, according to Tacitus.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Many again say that they were a race of Ethiopian origin, who in the time of King Cephas were driven by fear and hatred of their neighbours to seek a new dwelling place. Others describe them as an Assyrian horde who, not having sufficient territory, took possession of part of Egypt and founded cities of their own in what is called the Hebrew country, lying on the borders of Syria. Others, again, assign a very distinguished origin to the Jews, alleging that they were the Ptolemy, a nation celebrated in the poems of Homer, who called the city which they founded Hierosolima, after their own name.
Right.
So what he's referring to here is a section in the Iliad where Homer's talking about Bellerophon, the greatest hero and slayer of monsters in the days before Heracles, who is sent on a series of impossible quests. He has to kill the Chimera, he has to battle the Amazons, and he has to fight the Ptolemy. By the way, Bellerophon was also the guy who tamed the winged horse Pegasus with the help of Athena's magic bridle, and then pissed off the gods by trying to fly Pegasus into Mount Olympus.
Yeah,
the Ptolemy, he mentions as a fierce mountain tribe living somewhere in southern Anatolia, but that's it. That's all he says about the Ptolemy, Homer. Just they were tough motherfuckers. So tough that going fighting them was the impossible task, which Bellerophon pulls off, but it was sort of legendary that he was able to pull it off. And again, like a guy called Mr. Jerusalem coming from Egypt, Tacitus's sources, because he's not saying he believes this necessarily, this is just one of the stories that he's heard.
Yeah.
People just, reverse named it as onomastic. They said, well, there was a tribe called Ptolemy, Jerusalem, Hierosolima, sounds like that, so maybe they're those people, right?
Right, connection.
Yeah, it's easy to do that. We do that today. We go, well, that sounds like this, so those two things must be connected, right? And it's not always the case. And it's not the case here either. He goes on to say, most writers, however, agree in stating that once a disease which horribly disfigured the body broke out over Egypt, that King Bocchorus, seeking a remedy, consulted the oracle of Haman and was bidden to cleanse his realm and to convey into some foreign land this race detested by the gods.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Question. Okay, so thank you. There's a plague. It's making the bodies disfigured. The oracle says to the king, the gods so hate these people, the Jews, that if you get rid of them, the plague might go away. I'm going to get crazy here for a second. Let's just say that I'm the lawyer for the Jews, which is, anyway, did the Jews cause the plague? Did the gods cause the plague? I mean, who laid the plague down? And why is getting rid of the Jews from this land of Egypt going to suddenly make the plague go away? There's some discrepancies here, Your Honor. And it's putting the Jews in a bad light. And as far as I can tell, they haven't done anything bad yet. Or is it just because of who they are?
Yeah, they're just despised by the gods, so the gods hit them with the plague.
That was so casual.
Get
him the fuck out of here. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
King Bocchorus was a minor pharaoh of the 24th dynasty in Egypt. He's often known as Bakenranef, around about 720 BCE. And known to the Greeks as Bocchorus. Diodorus remembers him as being a lawgiver, clever in judgments. Oh. But basically, he's saying, they had leprosy. And the Egyptians kicked him out of the country and they had to go somewhere. So, in the Bible, the Old Testament, we talk about Moses leading the people out of Egypt, and like they were given their freedom and they got the fuck out of Egypt after being in slavery there.
Right.
This version that Tacitus had heard, he said most writers agree that they had leprosy and they were kicked out. Yeah. Tacitus continues, the people who had been collected after diligent search, finding themselves left in a desert, sat for the most part in a stupor of grief till one of the exiles, Moses by name, warned them not to look for any relief from God or man, forsaken as they were of both, but to trust to themselves, taking for their heaven-sent leader that man who should first help them to be quit of their present misery. They agreed, and in utter ignorance began to advance at random. Nothing, however, distressed them so much as the scarcity of water, and they had sunk ready to perish in all directions over the plain when a herd of wild asses was seen to retire from their pasture to a rock shaded by trees. Moses followed them, and guided by the appearance of a grassy spot, discovered an abundant spring of water. This furnished relief. After a continuous journey for 6 days, on the 7th day, they possessed themselves of a country, from which they expelled the inhabitants, and in which they founded a city and a temple. So not 40 years in the wilderness.
Right.
It was 7 days, and on the 7th day they rested.
So technically
Moses,
6.
wishing to secure for the future his authority over the nation, gave them a novel form of worship, opposed to all that is practiced by other men. Things sacred with us, with them have no sanctity, while they allow what with us is forbidden. In their holy place they have consecrated an image of an animal, by whose guidance they found deliverance from their long and thirsty wanderings. They slay the ram, seemingly in derision of Hammon, and they sacrifice the ox because the Egyptians worship it as Apis. They abstain from swine's flesh in consideration of what they suffered when they were infected by the leprosy to which this animal is liable. By their frequent fasts, they still bear witness to the long hunger of former days, and the Jewish bread, made without leaven, is retained as a memorial of their hurried seizure of corn. We are told that the rest of the 7th day was adopted because this day brought with it a termination of their toils. After a while, the charm of indolence beguiled them into giving up the 7th year also to inaction. But others say that it is an observance in honour of Saturn, either from the primitive elements of their faith having been transmitted from the Idii, who are said to have shared the flight of that god and to have founded the race, or from the circumstance that of the 7 stars which rule the destinies of men, Saturn moves in the highest orbit and with the mightiest power, and that many of the heavenly bodies complete their revolutions and courses in multiples of 7.
Sounds like Louis Farrakhan going to town with some numbers. Let me know when we can stop and break some of that down, because I did find a lot of this skewered and interesting. Okay, so let's see here. So the first thing, excuse me, sorry. So the first thing is that supposedly Moses changes a lot of the Jewish religious practices. The only reason for doing that, well, 2 reasons. 1, I guess he wants to be remembered. He wants to put his stamp on the Jewish people. 2, and I can't put it this any more simply, to be a cunt. So everything that the Jews hold dear, everybody else finds abhorrent. Everything that everybody else finds normal or whatever, the Jews find abhorrent. So it's literally just being the opposite, just to be an opposite. When you kill the ram, obviously you're upsetting the Egyptians, because to the Egyptians, to their religion, the ram was a divine symbol. The ram wasn't just an animal. It represented the God himself. And killing the ram would be akin to, sacrilege, religious sacrilege. Again, when it comes to slaying the ox, they're doing that just to piss off the Egyptians, because they worship Apis, if I'm saying that right, a revered bull deity. So right out the gate, and I know that Tacitus is just repeating what he's heard, but it's got this from here on out, most of it. it's got a very negative slant to it. It's like they're just doing it because they're base, they're mean, they're disgusting, they're perverse. And there's one thing that he kind of likes about them. We'll get to that a little later, but everything is just a negative. It's just coming from a negative point of view. They went to a place, they kicked those people out, they took it out, they took it over and they made it their own. Hello, we're talking about the Romans. The Romans have made a business of taking people's shit, and so is the Parthians and so is everybody else, because that's what you do. But I just am fascinated by the blatant negative spin on what could be maybe just facts and history for the stuff that is accurate.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think he's writing all of this to justify what the Romans are doing to the Jews in Jerusalem, right?
Absolutely. It's propaganda. Yeah.
Yeah. Secondly, I don't think he thinks them kicking out the natural inhabitants of this region is a bad thing. He just mentions that's what they did. I don't think he's passing judgment on that. But definitely, this whole section, he's portraying the Jews as dirty barbarians. I was talking a friend of mine, well, like one of Fox's friends' parents was over yesterday, and he said, can you give me the short version of where anti-Semitism comes from? And I said, well, first of all, I can't give a short version of anything. Secondly, yes, I can. And I was saying, like, the Romans, I was talking about the first Jewish-Roman war, and I'm like, but it wasn't about anti-Semitism. Yeah, the Romans saw the Jews as barbarians, but the Romans saw everyone as barbarians. Anyone that wasn't Roman was a barbarian to certain degrees. The Greeks had some sort of customs that they admired, but mostly they were barbarians.
Mm-hmm.
The Romans didn't give a fuck what you believed. They thought you were barbarians. That was just the way. As long as you shut up, paid your taxes, kept your nose clean, did what you were told, like basically your parenting style, right? I don't give a fuck.
Pretty much.
Who your real father is. Work. As long as when you're in my house, you do what you're told.
Toe the line, sister.
Yeah.
Toe the line. Yeah.
And anyone who caused trouble, we're going to get bitch slapped back into position.
Right.
The Romans they just want an efficient kingdom, like any kingdom, right? They just shut up, do what you're told,
Absolutely.
Don't cause trouble. Like the Chinese with the Uyghurs, everyone's like, oh, they're trying to they're just like, stop being terrorists. And if we're going to have to put you in re-education camps to re-educate you because you obviously think you can overthrow us, and you need re-education, because you're not going to overthrow us, right?
Right.
Stop causing trouble. But his view of their religious practices and the reason for their religious practices is interesting. So, and there are some elements of fact in this, I think. It's interesting. When I threw all this stuff into GPT, it said, well, no, they don't sacrifice the ox just to piss off the Egyptians. They do it for theological reasons and for a covenant and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wait, that's just post hoc justification. That's what they would have said later on, but that's probably not why they did it originally. There have got to be roots to these things. And it was like, yeah, you're right. So you drill down on it.
Right.
So, first of all, he talks about the worship of the Sabbath, the seventh day, because they had this journey and that they stopped. The Old Testament says they worship the Sabbath because God created the world in 7 days, and that's why they rest on the seventh day. But again, that's a post hoc justification.
Yes.
The way that a lot of these things develop, of course, is that people are doing things for generations, and then somebody goes, why do we do this again? And they go, oh, fuck. Anyone know? No, we don't know. Let's write a story to explain why we do this, right? To shut these fuckers up. So you come up with a story that says, well, God said or God did, and that's why we do it. Is that good enough? Right. Just shut the fuck up.
Because you can't question that. Once I say God said, that's it. That's the end of the discussion.
Over. Discussion over. Right. The Sabbath, the 7 day cycle comes from the Zoroastrians. So again, for people who don't remember their Jewish history, they were conquered at one point by the Babylonians, and a bunch of their elite were taken to Babylon. They're in exile for a century or so. And when they were freed by Cyrus the Messiah, as they thought he was, Cyrus the Great, they were allowed to go back and rebuild the temple, etc., which he helped them do. But they took with them a lot of Zoroastrian ideas, religious ideas that had sort of filtered their way into Judaism. So monotheism is one of those. The Jews were not monotheistic originally. They believed that there were lots and lots of gods. In fact, you read the Old Testament, there's no evidence of any monotheistic belief in the Old Testament. The Jews believed that there were lots of gods. They believed that their God, Adonai, Yahweh, Jehovah, was the best God and had their back and was protecting them. But there's plenty of talk in the Old Testament about all these other gods that other people worship and that, Yahweh is better than. Right. But the Zoroastrians were monotheists, and when the Jews were in Babylon, they started to get their head around this idea of, well, there is only one God. So the post-exile literature is where you start to see more talk of monotheism. And a lot of the stuff that ends up being written in the Old Testament is written post-exile, but they pretend that it's pre-exile, but it's not. Historians today believe it's written post-exile.